And welcome back to another episode of Amazin City. It's Antonio Slater and Jack Ramsey, as always, and we're back. More news. More, I guess you want to call it news. Still
Yeah.
talking Carlos Correa, the updated
What else
version
is
of
there
his
to talk?
story. There's not much that you want to talk Andrew Benintendi. We'll talk about Dom Smith, maybe a little bit.
I can
But
give you my failed New Year's resolutions already.
wow, buddy, it's the third day
Well,
of the year.
as I teased on my Twitter a week or so ago, I do have a mild concussion right now. I'm on the back end, so I'm fine. But a couple weeks ago
Hey,
I
concussions
decided.
are fun. I've had plenty of them.
Oh yeah. Well, I've always been the type of gym guy where like I go for months on end. I'll go every day, but then for months on end, I'll simply never go.
Mm.
So I told myself I'll find a happy medium there and go 3 to 4 times a week. But I already have to break that considering I have a concussion. So maybe I'll
You know
restart in
what?
like
That doesn't count though. As someone
I
who's
will.
also broken it because of concussions, that does not count. I hereby allow it. I allow it.
I was thinking maybe
Just
just
a second.
restart February 1st.
It's a good start. And since you had a concussion, there's a chance you won't remember it anyway. So I can make those jokes because I've had like 19 of them. It
Yeah,
happens.
me too. Hey,
Um,
got so many
so
concussions.
anyways, back
I'm
to the
not gonna do
Mets.
that. Yeah, Mets.
Uh, in the great words of Steve Cohen. So we have gotten a little bit more clarity. And as you said yesterday, we expect more clarity by the end of today. And we did get some, but not quite what we thought it was going to be. It seems like the deal is still getting done.
So
It
there's a
seems like
direct.
it's much more a matter of when, not if. It's just a matter of will it still be 12-3-15? What are the parameters going to be? Because um, as Ken Rosenthal said in the Athletic Baseball Show, he said it's going to be dramatically different.
Right. So
So
we're
I'm very curious to see from a fan's perspective what exactly that means.
so we're looking at all this from Ken Rosenthal, and obviously there's no more annoying timing in terms of the calendar year to have a story like this than the holiday. Because league offices are closed, player association offices are closed, legal offices are closed, team offices are closed. I'm sure Boris Correa, they all want time for the families. Cohen's is celebrating Hanukkah and whatnot. So obviously it's awful time. But we're looking at quotes from Ken Rosenthal. He says, and I quote, "We expect the Mets to get this deal done at some point." That's a big one for me. It's just we
Absolutely.
haven't we haven't heard someone outright say the Mets will get this done. We've heard there's too much to lose on both sides. We've
Mm-hmm.
heard source A and B say, "Oh, well, I think they'll get it done." But we have Ken Rosenthal, 1A, 1B with Jeff Passan
Right.
says that we expect the Mets to get this deal done at some point. That's a big
Yeah.
one for
Not a
me.
58% chance, not a
Right. We're not
51%, but it's going to get done.
Yeah, there's no
None of
numbers,
that.
no percentages. This is straight up. This is about as outward as you can be.
Right.
Straight up, we expect this deal to get done at some point. Continued, we expect it to be a dramatically different deal. It's not going to be 12-3-15 guaranteed. The question is, to what extent does the language change? Does the deal change? He follows it up with, I would assume this week we see resolution and then we see the Mets spring further into action. They're going to need to make some other trades. They have traded McCann and would trade Escobar if they finalize Correa. And then you may see some other things. So for me, the takeaway, obviously, aside from that, Rosenthal straight up expects the deal to get done.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to hammer that home as many times as I can.
Yeah.
Expect the deal to get done. It seems like they're then pivoting to a scenario of Guillorme versus Escobar. Because in theory, you're not starting one of them. You now have
Right.
you have a star-studded infield with several odd men out, really, if you will. You have Eduardo Escobar, you have Luis Guillorme, you have Darren Ruff, you have Brett Beatty. You have several odd men out here.
Mm-hmm.
But really, in this situation of the direct Correa implications, in terms of your already established major league roster, guys with no options. I think Guillorme might have one. But like guys who've been on the roster, I think he has one, but he's been on the roster since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
You got Escobar, who's on a guaranteed 8-figure deal. $10
Yeah.
million might be pocket change to the Mets, but that's like, if you're looking at the Orioles, that's like what, 25-30% of their payroll. That's still legitimate money. I mean,
Yeah. No, it's still money.
110 is easy to move. They were able to move McCann's 224, but it's still that's
Had to
eight
eat the
figures.
money, but still,
Right, but
they moved it.
they had to eat so much money, but it's
1
movable.
for 10 is starting third
It's
baseman money.
absolutely $10 million is a starting position player's money. So you're now looking who's the best fit. And I think there's plenty of different ways to go. Because
Oh yeah.
seemingly, and I think this hasn't even really been brought up somehow, considering the offseason the Mets have had, Darren Ruff is still on the roster. He
I
is
think we heard
still
his name once
he is
this
still
entire
employed
offseason.
by the New York Metropolitans Baseball Club.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
he is still on the Mets roster with no options. You can make a case for bringing Darren Ruff back. You can look and say, look, that was a fluke 40 at bat, 50 at bat, whatever it is, or 40 games, whatever it is. And you look at his larger
Right.
career sample size of
Right.
work since he got to the Giants. That's totally fine. That's fine and good. But you can't carry Guillorme, Vientos, Ruff, Beatty, Escobar. Several of them are going to have to go.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a proven track record of major league success, you're looking at Escobar, you're looking at Ruff.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, you're looking deeper. Is Ruff truly what's come down to that sample size he gave for the Mets down the stretch after the deadline? And if you're looking at Escobar, people are forgetting he was one of the worst starting position players in baseball for a good chunk of last year. From the months
It
of
got pretty
May
bad for a
to
while.
August, he was awful.
And I think it was magnified even more because that was when we really saw Luis Guillorme get more playing time. And for the first time in his entire career, not only was he showing the elite defense that he's always had,
He had
but
a
he was
great
hitting a
eye.
little bit.
He had a
He was
great
starting to hit a
eye,
little bit. He had like
good bat
330
to,
for a while.
good bat to ball skills. I mean,
Oh, always had it.
Guillorme can't hit for power.
Right.
There's a running joke in some circles I'm in that you could give Guillorme a 94-mile-per-hour fastball right down the pipe, and he's three hopping the fence. Like
It's probably, I mean, yeah.
it's possible. He's a gap to gap singles hitter with a good bat to ball skills and a good eye. If we're talking about him as an offensive player, but I think what makes it more impressive is, he slugged in I think the incredibly low 400s or high 300s and still put up a weighted runs created plus via Fangraphs of over 100. So with no power, he was still an above league average hitter.
Yeah.
Which is impressive because this is a power league. Oh, I'm trying to hold back a burp. We've said this time and time again. Don't look at me like that. This is a power league. I mean, what did we when we came on after the Braves series in Atlanta? What did we say? The Mets got outpowered.
Yeah, that's all it was.
The Mets got outpowered. So this is a power league, and he's still able to be a considerably above average league hitter with none of it. I mean, none of it. So
106 WRC plus. I just checked.
And what was his slugging? If you still have that page up, I'm willing to guess it wasn't even above 400.
Oh, I would absolutely guess it was below 400.
He had what, 3 homers last year?
Yeah, and they're both off of Steve Cishek, I think, or Darren O'Day. Slugging last year 340.
That's awful.
It's not great.
That's a good to not great OBP.
He had 81 hits last year, and he had 15 extra base hits.
Oh my God. 66 singles. God bless you.
Yeah.
But so and then you're looking at Escobar, you're asking, is that truly Escobar? It was the end of the year Escobar, or was the middle 100 or so games Escobar?
There were two Escobars last year. You either weren't getting him out or you were absolutely getting him out, and there was no in between.
And then you're looking at Mark Vientos. Is Vientos the slugger and lefty destroyer that Syracuse had? Or is Vientos more true to what we saw in Queens, where he's going to run into one, but he's a high strikeout, low contact guy?
Mm-hmm.
And, and then that brings you to what I think is the most interesting question the Mets have on their hands. Is if you finalize this deal and Carlos Correa is your third baseman for the next 6-7 years, Mr. Brett Beatty,
right?
What becomes of him? I've heard in some circles that the Mets view that Brett Beatty could be their left fielder of the future. For as long as that club control runs, they think he can be their everyday above average starting left fielder to go along
with. One thing that you really keyed into when we were talking to Michael Mayer is that he's athletic enough, and he's done it before in the minor leagues. He's athletic enough to play a very serviceable left field.
And he's got a good arm.
If his bat lives up to what we saw last year and he got the results that he quite frankly deserved, I think a serviceable defensive left field is more than okay, and the bat will make up for it.
No, and I absolutely agree. I completely agree with that. And I think as you're looking deeper into this and you're asking yourself, well, he's just a he's a third baseman. You can't just throw him in left field. This isn't road to the show, you
Right.
know. But you have to remember he's been working in left field since early summer, late spring of 2021. The only
Mhm.
work he's getting out there isn't just when he's penciled into the lineup card.
Right.
He is getting reps in practice, in camp, before games. He's getting work in out there in the off season. So he's been working out as an outfielder and getting outfield reps in for a year and a half.
Also, let's be honest. Like
The
Brett
sample
Beatty can read
size,
between the lines here.
the
If
sample,
he sees that he sees the news that the Mets and Carlos Correa have come to an agreement reportedly. He knows Correa's playing third base, which is his position. Don't you think he's reaching out to the Mets or vice versa? And the Mets are reaching out to him. He's like, hey, listen, Brett, go out into the field, have your brother, your dad, whatever it might be, your cousin, uncle, college roommate, have him hit some balls to your left field. Just take some reps, get comfortable in the position, because that's probably going to be your position with this organization moving forward.
and that's
If
not a
Carlos
bad
Correa
thing.
comes to the Mets,
That is not a bad thing.
no, it's not. It's a good problem to have.
The Mets are now in a spot where they're taking their top 20 prospect or baseman who's athletic enough and proven that he can look good in left field, and the returns on it are good. And they're going to try and move him out there because they signed Carlos Correa to play third base. That is a good problem. That is
It's a good
nowhere.
problem to have when you're bringing a top 15 player in baseball and making Mark Canha your fourth outfielder.
We're like, what, 5 years removed from second baseman Jose Bautista?
I forgot about that.
I
I don't think that was
don't.
5 years ago.
That was 2018, right?
I don't even think that was 5 years ago.
He was on the
It
2018
might have
team.
been. It might have been 2018, 2019.
He was on 2018. He was not on
I
the
think it was.
2019 team
I couldn't possibly tell you.
because that team was
Travis
good.
Darno going back from third base. Who was it with Daniel Murphy? I think from
I
third
don't
to
know.
second.
It was something awful.
Lucas
2018
Duda
Mets.
playing the outfield.
Jose Bautista.
Hit a walk-off grand slam with the Mets. Though
And he did not pimp it. That was the dumbest shit ever. But
I thought he pimped it. Whatever.
he was too
Either
old.
way.
But you're at a point now where this is the problem you're having. If you can finalize the deal with a top 10 player in baseball that then moves your top 20 prospect to be your everyday left fielder for 6 years, paired with your top 10 center fielder and your top 10 right fielder playing behind your top 3 shortstop with your top 5 pitching staff on the mound.
Good problems to have.
If we were looking at like going into last year, if you're trying to look at where the Mets were, I think at every position or when the season ended,
Yeah.
with the roster they had, if you're looking to see where they stacked up in accordance with the rest of baseball positionally, if it felt like they were weak in left field, or at least below average, because Mark Canha is good.
Maybe middle of the pack. I wouldn't say below average.
It was fine. It was okay. But people were forgetting that Mark Canha had to be kind of babied down the stretch because of his hip injury that's been lingering for years.
Right.
They were starting Tyler Naquin far more than you thought they would.
Right.
You had horrid catching.
Yeah.
And third base was awful for 100 games. But for the first 30 and the last 30, it was pretty damn good.
Mm-hmm.
But you're looking at the larger sample size. Eduardo Escobar needed to be the player of the month to get his season numbers to an above average hitter.
Right.
So you're now at a point where the third base problem is going to be Carlos Correa now. The catching, I'm buying into the Omar Narvaez bounce back. I see
Sure.
it. I see the numbers. At the worst case, you're now starting Francisco Alvarez there, and that is fine.
And that is fine.
And you are now going to have some platoon.
It's still a little curious to have 3 catchers on the roster.
Well, I
But
genuinely do think.
I think you're putting Alvarez as your everyday DH against lefties.
I think he starts the year in AAA.
Okay, interesting.
I think it was kind of it's kind of been proven through how they've operated this winter, specifically with Narvaez deal, that he came up as, holy shit, we need someone who can hit lefties. And that's fine.
And then, hey, here's Max Fried.
Because that's what they needed. But I don't think that makes him, especially with the change in how options work now, not that he's probably ever going to get optioned again, but it gives some more comfortability that you can play that game with him. So I think he starts the year in AAA. with Nito and Narvaez as your MLB catchers. But these are good problems to have, and I think it all just circles back to that one first sentence from Ken Rosenthal. We expect this deal to get done.
Yeah. And those are the key words there. That, and I think going back to what the overall contract, he said it's not going to be 12 for 315 guaranteed. I think guaranteed is the optimal word in this.
Yeah, and I don't think it'll be like an NFL contract where you have, you look at Russ. Russ is a $250 million contract, but 197 is guaranteed. It's not going to be anything like that.
Right.
I mean,
like Derek Carr, the Raiders can cut Derek Carr this year and have no repercussions.
I mean, even if you're looking at like Jim Harbaugh in coaching terms, his buyout's like what, $1 million, so he can go ring chase in the NFL.
Yeah.
But he makes $8 million a year. But it's fine if he leaves because it's not going to hamper the school at all. If you're a school like Michigan, $1 million is $1 million. It's whatever. That's probably how much you're paying your running backs. But
yeah,
like it's going to be probably the most interesting contract baseball has ever seen.
Yeah, and everyone's going to try to make the comparisons to JD Martinez, which is fair because it's the Boris. Boris line
it's a
there.
Boris guy. It's a Boris guy. That might be the framework here.
Yeah,
you might be looking.
I was talking to someone at work about this.
Where do you work?
A place. I work in a building.
I work in a restaurant.
Those are two vastly different contracts. I get that JD Martinez was one of the best free agents available at that time, but he was never playing the position. He was 4 or 5 years older when he signed the contract. And with all due respect to JD Martinez and the guys that are currently making this kind of type of money, 5 years for 110 or whatever the money was is not anywhere close to what 12 for 315 is. Carlos Correa is 28. JD Martinez was 30, 32 when he signed it. It's different. It's so vastly different.
Right. And the money's incredibly different, and the expectations are incredibly different, and the injuries are incredibly different. Right. I forget who I was. It might have been the Dan Patrick show I was listening to. Shout out to the Dan Patrick show for no personal reasons whatsoever. By the time this Correa deal is done, because the way you're sitting here right now, it's 8 years since that plate was put in, deal for 12 years. That's going to be a 20-year-old plate.
Right.
And that concern is legitimate, and I get it. I start to freak out when there's less than a week left on the expiration date on my milk.
Sure.
Let alone a plate in an ankle for 20 years. My car gets down to half a tank of gas, and I'm eyeing down every Wawa I see. Let alone a plate that's in an ankle for 20 years.
20 years.
That's a long time. That is a long time, and that is a valid and understandable concern.
Yeah.
JD Martinez did not have what would be a 20-year-old plate in his ankle. But what
Frank injury.
But what JD Martinez did have was kickers in his contract that if he missed X number of games with injury Y, years Z1 through Z3 would become mutual options.
Right.
And mutual options are the most useless thing in baseball.
Right.
We've never get picked up. We've seen it with Michael Givens. We've seen it with everyone who's ever had a mutual option. They are never agreed to because they always heavily favor one side. So if anything, I think we see something, and I was telling you like this before we come on the air. If Carlos Correa misses 100 games over his first 6 seasons, mind you, that's 870 baseball games, I think. Something like that. I'm not good at math.
I think you're in the ballpark.
162 times 6.
I was going to just do it on here so you don't look.
972. So if over the first...
You're in the ballpark. You're in the ballpark.
I'm not a math major. It's for nerds. I have a girlfriend, unlike math majors. But
what you just roasted math majors for?
So if you're the Mets and you're looking at this, you're like, all right, so if over the first 1,000 games of this contract, Carlos Correa misses 125 on the IL, you're now looking at 1 out of every 8 games. If he misses 125 games on the injured list with an injury that relates to his ankle that has the plate in it, I forget which side it's on.
Right.
His right ankle.
Sure.
Oh, I thought you were saying it was his right ankle. Oh, you said right.
I was just saying, like, yeah. I was
all right. So if the ankle in question causes an injury that accumulates to 125 games or more on the IL in total, he can even have it flare up 10 different times and miss 13 games each time. You're now at 130 games over 6 years.
Right.
If that happens, years 7 through 12 become mutual options at $20 million
Mm-hmm.
or at $45 million. Heavily favors the player,
Absolutely.
but the Mets aren't going to pick that up.
No.
He goes back
I mean,
and
maybe the $45 million at that point might be chump change.
right. it very well might be, but you don't know. So I figure there'll be some. I figured that's what we're looking at, and that's what JD Martinez had. If he
Yeah.
missed X number of games or X percentage of games on that he's active for, or of possible games, if he's inactive on the IL with an injury relating to the plate in question, if he misses
Mm-hmm.
15% of his games, the final 7 years of the contract become mutual options, or the money's non-guaranteed. Who knows? Maybe they'll get creative and get an NFL style. It's 35 million a year, or it's 27 million a year, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
27 million a year with 18 guaranteed. And if you have kickers that take you up a level each time as you stay healthy.
And now we've seen that precedent in baseball. That happens a lot. I think Greinke had an issue,
but you don't
deal
see
like
that
before.
on.
I think Wainwright had it. Verlander has it. I think Scherzer has it.
But you don't see that on shortstop deals for a dude who's 28.
No, you don't see it on these big boy contracts.
That's where it's going to be unprecedented. Where and I think if any time you see that as a kicker for a vesting option, not for guaranteed money.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think that's almost an NFL style deal where if Carlos Correa plays anything less than 50% of his games in year 7, he only gets 50% of his salary.
Mm-hmm.
Or if he plays 85% of possible games, if he's active for 85% of possible games, he gets 100% of his salary.
Yeah.
Or if he's active for 80% or more of possible games, you get 100% of your salary because 130 is effectively the benchmark for a full season.
Sure.
Allowing for whatever's here and there.
Yeah.
So,
I think, and this
or
is
something
where I
more
think,
like it'll be interesting. It's gonna. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is going to be the most interesting contract in baseball history, and I think this is going to set a interesting precedent for injury litigation in sports.
Yeah.
And
this is where the Mets can also get creative in how they handle Correa, again, if it goes official.
And this is also very much a legal matter.
Yeah.
This is very much a legal
lawyers
matter.
on both sides to sign off on this.
Because
do.
There is potential for both. If this deal as is, let's say they go through with the 12-3-15 no protections, there's serious chance for the Mets to get screwed over there.
Big time.
But if the Mets randomly drop down and say, no, we won't go past 6 years,
mm-hmm.
there's going to be some pretty nasty grievances against the Mets from the Players Association and their lawyers. So making sure you get something perfectly in the middle for every side is going to take oodles of lawyers. And I don't use the word oodles lightly.
I think this is the first time I've heard you say the word oodles.
Oodles. I'm trying to be more PG.
As
oodles of lawyers.
As a part of the show. Is that another resolution of yours? Is be more PG?
Just on the show.
Okay.
When I was going through the YouTube, I selected that we were a family friendly page. So I don't know how to undo that.
I don't know about that.
Until then, oodles of lawyers.
Oodles. But another thing that the Mets can kind of use in their advantage is that DH spot. You still have Brett Beatty who could play the third base spot. As of now, you still have Eduardo Escobar, who we know could play a good third base. You still have Luis Guillorme, who, let's face it, if he played every day at third base, he'd just give him the Gold Glove.
Right.
But you have Carlos Correa, so you can manage his innings, his workload a little bit more, have him play DH. That way you can make it a little bit easier to meet those thresholds, to meet the vesting options and make this contract work long term. So it's going to be interesting, man. I don't see this falling through for several reasons. Another thing is that the Mets have the leverage for a few reasons, but one of the things that Correa and Boris have is what Steve Cohen said. If you go back to when this first happened, I guess at this point 2+ weeks ago, Steve Cohen was quoted on the deal. Having a team official be quoted on a deal almost supersedes a team announcement. If this falls through, it's going to be bad.
The price tag on the fine for the Mets would, I honestly think, be worse. This would be handled tougher than the NFL handled the Jerry Ross tanking allegations and tampering.
Right.
Where he told Brian Flores to throw games so they get the number one pick, fire him, bring in Sean Payton, and sign Tom Brady.
Right.
And he got suspended for a year and fined $1 million.
Sounds right.
And they lost their
Plus the
first
draft
round,
picks as well.
and I think they lost their first round pick.
Yep.
I think this would be worse.
Oh
I
yeah.
think I genuinely, I think you're looking at a world where the Mets are tagged 7 figures on a fine, if not 8. The Mets lose picks, and
They're
I
going
wouldn't.
to be stripped from a lot of stuff.
And they would probably be stripped of all their international free agent money. I can see a world where they're stripped half their bonus pool money,
Mm,
or this is what the PA is trying for.
right.
Because if you're at a point where the owner of the team is commenting on a deal and then the team tries to back out, like you said, that basically supersedes any tweet.
Right.
That supersedes any press release, any email.
Yeah. Any hype video from the Mets, it
There's
supersedes
nothing
almost all of that.
there is nothing a team publicist can do that'll supersede Steve Cohen himself going to John Heyman saying
Right.
Carlos Correa is what we needed and we now have him.
Right.
Nothing.
And
Nothing.
that's another thing. He said the words, "We now have him." Steve, I know you're kind of new to this. You can't be doing that. You can't, guy. But I think we'll look back on this and say that's not that big of a deal because ultimately the assumption is this is going to get done. And
No, but it's
let me
a
tell you
tremendous
something.
risk.
Let me tell you something, Jack. What we saw this morning, that was one pretty happy baby.
That's a
That was
beautiful
one
segue.
pretty happy.
That is a
baby.
beautiful segue.
That was a pretty happy. I don't think I can't remember the last time I've seen a baby look that happy.
No, I mean he pizza hot dogs in New York, man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can't say I blame him.
How can you not? How can you not hot dog pretzel New York?
No, you can't hot dog, pretzel, pizza, hot dog, whatever it was. But no, real talk is there's a lot to try and dissect in that photo. And I don't want to sound like a college sorority girl right here and go in way too deep on Instagram posts or whatever. But I mean, it clearly looks like a third baseman's mitt. There's
Custom
orange.
third baseman's mitt.
There's orange lettering. I don't care for
the blue batting gloves.
Right. I don't care for the Boris Core t-shirt
Ah,
just because he's been wearing those all summer and that man's about to make him a very rich dude.
a very rich man.
But I mean, and then you have the I Heart NY shirt and going to work. What are they going to work for? Where are you going? You want to take your official team photo shoot?
Yeah.
But no, I mean that really we're on Correa's babygate.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Correa babygate. Kylo Correa babygate.
Can you say it's a baby monitor? We'll see you next week. Oh man,
That was bad.
Sorry, it was there. I had to.
You also had to make the subsequent apology, so
No,
I'll let it slide. But I mean, it's impressive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'll take it, man. We went a week where our sources of information were numeric chances and odds, and the Sports Illustrated, no, not to throw shade, but the Sports Illustrated quote where I give it 51-49 to get done, but it's got to get done. Like whatever the hell that is,
but it's gonna get done. What?
John Heyman putting 55% on it. We have substantive stuff. This is heavy stuff. This is what we want. We can record an episode over this.
Yeah, as silly as it seems, a baby picture is the most news we've gotten.
That's the most news we've gotten
in 2 weeks.
No, yeah, really since the last since the Christmas Eve. Since Christmas Eve, this is the most news we have gotten.
Yeah. Ah, man.
But it's kind of insane, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's insane in the sense that this is still happening. It's insane in the sense that there has been no resolution, but it's also insane in the sense that it happened right before the longest federal holiday of the year.
Yeah, and that's been a holdup. I'm not gonna get too into it, but I can tell you it's a holdup on things.
Yeah, and
Offices
it's
being closed for two major holidays will hold things like this up.
right, and even just beyond offices, if you're looking at lawyers and whatnot,
Hmm.
they're not going back in for the 26th through the 30th.
Right,
They're gone from Christmas to New Year. They're taking that week off.
right,
They're not going back in. Not for no special whatever's. Like and they're not working from home either.
right.
That laptop stayed in the office. That work BlackBerry stayed. Well, it's probably not BlackBerry's if you're a lawyer.
BlackBerry, Jesus, Mary.
Not if you're a lawyer.
What
That
year is
work
it?
that work phone stayed in the office.
Yeah,
So no matter what, no one tells you it has an impact. And if you think it doesn't, then you have an unfortunate misunderstanding of what goes into these types of things.
right. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
So me neither, to be honest.
No.
But the other part of this Rosenthal quote is, what comes after Correa.
Hmm.
He mentions trading Escobar, which makes you lead to believe there's an ability to trade Yorme. You still have Ruff McCann, or not Ruff McCann, Ruff Vientos, Beatty. So I'm just gonna ask you, who to you is assuming that they just option Vientos and they can just option Beatty and all that,
Right.
who to you is the odd man out of Ruff, Escobar, and Beatty?
It's unfortunate because once again, I want the answer to be Darren Ruff, just because of the recency bias and what we saw
Well, we love
from
a good.
him last year.
You gotta love a good recency bias.
Of course.
That's what keeps the sports world turning.
But the answer is it's Escobar. Because once this deal goes through, if this deal goes through, the Mets are going to want to try to lessen their payroll a little bit. Darren Ruff's $3 million isn't going to do that. And even if you attach a prospect to it, a Mauricio, a Beatty, a Vientos, their 300,000 isn't going to lessen the payroll. They're going to have to try to take a major chunk out of this, and that's Eduardo Escobar. Like we said before, 1 year, $10 million with the option after that. That's very comparable to the contract that I think Boston just gave for Justin Turner. And he's going to be playing every day. Granted, Justin Turner is older, and he'll be playing a less premier position at first base. But 1 year, $10 million for a guy that's versatile, who could play a couple different positions, a switch hitter. He has power, can hit 20 plus home runs. He's going to drive and runs. He's going to steal bases. He plays a very, very solid third base. 1 year, 10 million. That's a viable contract that teams will take on, where you don't even have to eat any of the money for it because he's going to play every day.
And if you were
It's
to
not
stay
like a
with
James McCann where it's so unbearable where you need to get rid of that contract. So I think it's Escobar because he'll probably be the most attractive to the other teams. Someone like Beatty will get you a bigger return. However,
someone like Beatty, you don't exactly view as a roster casualty.
right
You're willing to make it, to give the effort to try and make it work somewhere else. It's not like
on the nose,
it's not like they're signing Carlos Correa simply because they don't trust Brett Beatty.
right?
It's because the owner has 3 years left to come through on a self-proclaimed promise.
Right. And if you go back to that promise, he really said it's in that 3 to 5 year window, and the first two were kind of, just stepping stones. We're now in that 3 year window where Steve Cohen wants to take over the game of baseball. And that's another reason why I think he really wants to get this deal done.
And part of that is sustainable winning.
Right.
And I think a guy like Brett Beatty factors into that more than people want to understand, want to admit, is the way I should phrase it. Because I understand the love for Mark Canha and how white people like him. He's an awesome guy. He's a good player. He's fun. He seems like a good dude. But Mark Canha is also on a 1-for-13 deal now, which is easily movable. And Mark Canha is not what stops you from Brett Beatty's development.
Right.
Simple and true.
Right.
Mark Canha does not hold back Brett Beatty one bit. if they're calling everyone saying, "Hey, do you want Escobar? Do you want Escobar?" and they're met with, "No, we want Canna," bite the bullet and trade him, and just
Right.
run with Brett Beatty and left day one, and just figure the rest out later.
Again, these are problems to have. These are good
Right.
issues.
But no, I think I agree with you in the sense that Escobar is going to be the odd man out, just purely because he's easy to move and he's a productive major leaguer, which unfortunately is not something you can entirely say about Darren Ruff. Darren Ruff is going to be easy to move. He makes like
You can
what
just cut him if you want to.
$3.5 million. It's nothing. If someone believes that Darren Ruff can have some sort of comeback, that's easy money.
Steve Cohen makes that $3 million back before the paperwork gets filed.
Yeah,
He doesn't care about that.
not one bit. But no, this is
So then what would you let's just say it's an Escobar, or I'll even throw in Carrasco because they're the two guys that have probably the most movable contracts that look, for lack of a better word, expendable.
well.
What would you look for in return?
Why are we lumping Carrasco into this?
Just because he's a name that's been tossed around in there.
So now we're just looking at the movable contracts they still have.
Right. I'm not saying trade Carrasco. I'm very pro keep Carrasco, but listen, the payroll. If you take Escobar's contract, you take Carrasco's contract, what does it equal out to? Like $26 million. What's the AV on Carlos Correa? $26 million. So you're pretty much breaking even there.
I think if I'm looking to move them, I'm looking just for a relief arm in return that can have some sort of impact and put up major league innings.
Right.
Because if there's one thing the Mets can still add on to right now, it's their bullpen. Obviously, that back five looks good.
Yep.
But you're looking at Smith, Raley, Ottavino, Robertson, Diaz, but you still have those three arms.
Yeah.
So if you can even get like a new swingman in,
sure,
and get your next Trevor Williams. I mean, William Woods is now off the 40-man roster, so that's another option. And if figure you have Zach Green at your Rule 5 pick, that's still 6 spots taken up with 2 free for like a Montes de Aca, for a Steven Writings, for a Jeff Brigham, for a Eliezer Hernandez. Whatever way you want to slice this up, maybe even a Jose Budo. Then, of course, you have Lucchesi, Peterson, McGill. So whatever way you want to slice it up, there are plenty of options. But, this with options comes question marks, because you're hoping one comes through. And while you want to live in a world where it's like, all right, well, if you have 5 options for 2 spots, at the bare minimum, one of them is going to hit.
You'd hope.
And you figure the last spot out just to be rotating doors. Nagosic, another guy I forgot. But, you want as many, I think as a team going into a year with championship aspirations, you want as minimal question marks as possible.
Of course.
And for good, bad, or indifferent, that just provides question marks.
Yeah.
So I think that's all. And there's always ways to add on to the pen.
Oh, of course.
I mean,
look at David Robertson. 2 years ago, this guy thought his career in baseball was done. Tampa picks him up. He pitches like a 2 ERA. And now here he is making $10 million with the Mets. And he might be their 8th inning guy. There's always ways.
Yeah, and it's not like he was a Tampa merchant. He goes to Chicago, not an incredibly smart pitching team. Pitches great. Goes to Philly, not the greatest spot for a pitcher or a reliever.
Right.
Pitches great.
Pitches in the World Series.
Pitches in the World Series. Pitches for the Olympic team, right?
Don't know about that.
I might be wrong. But
I know he pitched in the WBC.
Yeah.
But...
No, but it's going to be interesting. I think they keep Carrasco, but I think Escobar's gone for good, bad, or indifferent. Paul had a good run.
Sure did.
And we will miss Paul.
Do you think they need to find a guy named Paul and trade for him?
No. Too soon. But I definitely
I'm telling you, I think a team like Tampa Bay makes so much sense. Trade Escobar for like a Pete Fairbanks kind of guy.
Or
I don't know if would work there, but that's kind of what I'm looking at.
Just take pitching depth, man. Like,
sure,
a AAA reliever you like that isn't on the 40-man, bring him in, add him to yours soon. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I unfortunately don't go to school for segues, so I'm not good at making them. But the Mets also added seemingly rounded out their coaching staff.
Hmm.
I've heard that this is the last move they expect on their staff, barring retirements, quits, whatever. About as random as of a former major leaguer as you can get.
It really is, dude.
But he has been in coaching for some time now. Eric Hinsky, assistant hitting coach under Jeremy Barnes. Hinsky has ties to the Mets staff, worked with Billy Epler, was in Anaheim when Billy Epler was in Anaheim in 2018. He was actually once DFA'd by the Diamondbacks, I believe, when they added Eric Chavez.
It's a fun little
I don't know if there's bad blood
tidbit.
there or something, but
Hmm.
but here's my unreasonably hot take.
Okay.
It feels to me like the Mets are kind of starting to build things towards Eric Chavez being the manager once Buck Showalter retires.
I kind of always thought that.
And I feel like this is another move that makes me feel that way. Because Chavez just strikes me as a guy who likes the numbers and he likes the data and he likes to be smart.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants baseball dudes around him. Jimmy Barnes played minor league ball. He's a baseball dude. Eric Hinsky is a baseball dude. Jeremy Hefner is a baseball dude. So that's just my take on it. But this is, I'm not going to sit here and try to overanalyze an assistant hitting coach.
Yeah.
It's, that the guys are going to go to Chavez, are going to go to Barnes. You just hope Barnes and Chavez are on the same page. But welcome to the Mets, Eric Hinsky. And thankfully, it's Coach Eric Hinsky and not player Eric Hinsky. Although he does feel like someone who would fit in well on those early 2010s teams that had like Scott Hairston. Oh God, who was the guy? He ended up being the Cubs third base coach.
Oh God.
Oh shoot. He had an awful send that cost the Cubs a game against the Mets.
I gotta look this up.
Shoot, who is it?
But yeah, like the Scott Harrisons, the Chris Woodwards,
Willie Harris,
yeah,
who's somehow only 44.
Kelly Johnsons.
Hey, whoa. Kelly was
Love me
good.
some Kelly Johnson.
Kelly was on the playoff teams, man. But yeah, I mean that's just Mets news we got to touch on. It's going to be interesting, really. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Rosenthal saying that they expect this to get done, and he's expecting some clarity this week. At least I think that's a direct quote.
Yeah.
Those are all good things for the Mets.
If Ken Rosenthal is saying he expects resolution by this week, these are good things you want to hear.
Or he would assume.
You're likely going to see Carlos Correa in a Met uniform by Thursday, maybe Friday. Either way, it's all good stuff. And this, you don't hear anyone betting their family farm in Connecticut. There's none of that going on.
Well,
hopefully we don't. Hopefully we're not hearing any more of that. I know a certain member of this podcast said we'll eat a RAV4, but
look.
That was for if they didn't, if they did sign him. So if anything, this is a good thing.
I am a man of my word.
You sure are. You better be.
But much like Ken Rosenthal, I expect this RAV4 to be very different than the RAV4 everyone else was expecting or that was initially reported.
You expect to be dramatically different?
Maybe edible.
Mm-hmm.
In the form of like a
I
cake
hope so,
or something.
because you're going to be eating it, so hopefully it's edible.
I think people have forgotten by now.
I don't think people have forgotten.
Yeah.
Someone said we put out rate your confidence on a scale of 1 to 10, and someone put RAV4 out of 10. So I don't think people have forgotten.
That was
Jack.
Satish, and I love my man Satish, but that was cold. That was cold.
Yeah, people won't forget that.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's nice that we had stuff to sit here and talk about, and we didn't have to talk about numbers.
Yeah.
Imagine
the only numbers that we talked about was 12 for 315, and that's it.
And RAV4, everyone's favorite
RAV4.
Right now. But imagine
great car. What a vehicle.
Imagine if we had to sit here and talk about 51% and 55%.
No.
I'd be driven up a fucking wall. God. I almost got a whole episode without swearing.
You drive up that wall with the RAV4.
All right, and for Jack Ramsey and Antonio Slater, just
But yeah, I
well,
mean, there's nothing else to talk about at this
right.
point.
And a quick note from us: keep an eye out for some changes.
Yeah,
We are making some changes to the way we do things. Still gonna be the two of us. Still gonna be sitting here shooting the shit about the Mets,
yeah.
but we're looking to bring you better quality stuff, better quality product. That is our New Year's resolution to you.
Things will look a little bit different, that's for sure.
Things will look different. We're taking a different approach to things. We always appreciate your feedback. So always feel free to shoot us DMs, leave comments on YouTube. As long as you're not talking about my hairline or trying to guess what's in the background of Antonio's camera that's blurred out, we should be fine.
I mean,
We
hey,
should be.
I used to not have as blurred, so the
Well,
people have seen it before.
I went around. I went out and changed my background a little bit, make it a little bit more festive. Just got my nice
Listen, I'm
Mets
not
flag
I'm
up
not
there.
afraid. There it is. Bam. Hashtag art. Look at that. Bam.
Oh, dog.
Bam. More art over there. That's just a random dog. That's not even my dog. That's just a picture that my fiance likes or she bought it.
Oh, good lord.
Well, and now we're blurred again. Bam.
Anyway,
Anyway,
like, comment, subscribe. We did no football talk today. That might be a first.
look at us.
Um, we probably have more football to talk than ever, to be honest.
We sure do.
But this
The
is a
one year
Mets,
the Giants make the freaking playoffs, we're not talking about.
and the Broncos finally get rid of their coach, and they're going to pay Jim Harbaugh millions of dollars. But it doesn't matter. This is a Mets podcast. Like, subscribe, comment, send it to your friends in honor of Carlos Correa. Link our podcast to 12 and 3.15 people you know. But in all reality, like, comment, subscribe. We always appreciate it. Interact with us on Twitter. We're always here for fun. We don't take this too seriously, so you shouldn't either. I'm on a couch with a Mets flag behind me and a wall that's barely put together.
There you go.
Slater's got hashtag art behind him.
Mm-hmm.
We're just here to talk, man.
That's right.
Jack Ramsey,
Antonio Slater. And as always,
Jim.
LFGM.